Good evening. Thanks for joining us. It's Wednesday, March 29th, 2023 here in Seoul. You're watching our special coverage for Summit for Democracy. I'm Yoon Jung-min. The world leaders are meeting today for a virtual summit co-hosted by the leaders of South Korea, the U.S., Costa Rica, the Netherlands, and Zambia. This plenary session features several themes, including economic growth and shared prosperity, which will be hosted by South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol. Seoul's top office hostess will serve as a chance to set the tone for democracy and promote related values. Other discussions involve interventions by civil society groups, delivering justice for all, among others. U.S. President Joe Biden will be hosting Democracy Delivering on Global Challenges. This session comes at a pivotal time where the values of democracy are highlighted amid increasing challenges like the war in Ukraine and rivalry between the West and Russia and China. It's the second of its kind as President Biden hosted the first summit in 2021 designed to protect and promote civil and political rights and human rights on global level amid the rise of autocratic governments. This time, around 120 countries have been invited for the two-day session, along with the members. The session is about to start. Take a look.
We are tackling the issues that matter most to people's lives, creating jobs, strengthening food and global health security, and ensuring our children have what they need to succeed.
We are making strides to avert a climate catastrophe and unlock a clean energy future that is equitable and fair.
We're holding Russia accountable for its unjust and unprovoked war against Ukraine, showing that democracies are strong and resolved.
And together, we are defending the human rights and fundamental freedoms of journalists, activists, civil society, and indeed members of vulnerable communities who are too often ignored by those in public office.
Today, we're coming together again because we have to keep building on this progress and shaping the future we want for all of our children, all of them.
Democracy is how we can continue to create a world that is more free and more fair to everyone.
And it is up to all of us to show that democracies can continue to deliver.
So, together, we must continue to fight for free and fair elections.
We must continue to lift up reformers, especially young people.
To strengthen the free press and support the open exchange of ideas.
To counter corruption and all those who perpetrate it, and to ensure that technologies unleash instead of undermine our potential for progress.
This is the urgent work we are called to do together for our present and for our future.
The stakes could not be greater.
But as democracies, if we work together, nothing is beyond our reach.
Because our greatest power lies in the unlimited potential of our people.
So thank you all for participating today. We've got a lot of work to do.
In December 2021, over 100 world leaders gathered at the first Summit for Democracy and committed to support the rule of law, fight corruption, defend a free press, bolster democratic reformers, and uphold universal human rights. In the 15 months since, we followed through on pledges, passed new laws, committed new funding, created new institutions, and worked together in new ways. NGOs and private companies made commitments of their own. Democracy gathered momentum and grew stronger, while autocracy weakened. We gather now for the second Summit for Democracy, convened by 5 co-hosts: the United States, Costa Rica, the Netherlands, the Republic of Korea, and Zambia, to chart a path forward and renew our shared commitment to democracy as the system best able to deliver for all people. We turn now to the Secretary General of the United Nations.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, democracy, the rule of law, and respect for human rights are hallmarks of resilient, inclusive, and peaceful societies. But today, in many parts of the world, these values are under assault. The walls are closing in on civic spaces, constitutional rights are being curtailed, and civil liberties are being eroded. Freedom of expression is in free fall, dissenting voices are silenced. Human rights defenders face persecution, while prosecutors fighting corruption face reprisals. And journalists confront censorship, detention, and violence. The number of media workers killed across the world last year rose by a horrific 50%. Excellencies, engulfed in crisis, people are being easily seduced by promises of simple solutions. In these times of turbulence and turmoil, the siren songs of so-called enlightened despotism are resonating. But today, we see more and more despotism and less enlightenment. History has shown time and again that autocratic leadership is not a guarantor of stability, it is a catalyst of chaos and conflict. We are in the midst of dramatic upheavals. Technology is reshaping life as we know it. The tectonic plates of geopolitics are shifting, and global threats cannot be solved by any one government or organization acting alone. Strong democratic societies are places that are capable of self-correction and self-improvement. They can enable change, even radical change, without bloodshed and violence. And crucially, they are centers for broad-based cooperation rooted in the principles of equality, participation, and solidarity. Today, however, these principles are strained to the breaking point. Polarization is being supercharged by social media. Irrationality is running rampant, and science is under siege. Minorities and migrants are scapegoated. On current trends, full gender equality is 300 years away, and the foundations of social cohesion and trust in democratic institutions are being rocked to the core. And setbacks towards achieving the Sustainable Development Goals are amplifying despair and discontent. To harness the power of democracy, we must strengthen its defenses. And this means investing in a new social contract with governments and their people to rebuild trust and social cohesion, bolstering the system of checks and balances, tackling inequalities, combating corruption, prioritizing education, and expanding opportunities, setting up guardrails in the digital world to protect against the perils while realizing its promise, and realizing the universality of all human rights, civil, cultural, economic, political, and social. Excellencies, growing up, my own country, Portugal, was ruled by dictatorship. I've seen how the repression of human rights is like a poison in the national bloodstream, dulling the vibrancy of society, robbing people of their dignity and potential. And I have lived to see democracy flourish, expanding horizons of hope and opportunities. Human rights and democratic values are our ultimate tool to help societies thrive in freedom, to achieve equality for women and girls, to vanquish xenophobia, racism and hate, to advance sustainable development and to forge peace. These goals are at the heart of the United Nations. Democracy flows from the United Nations Charter. Its opening invocation of "We the Peoples" reflects the fundamental source of legitimate authority, the consent of the governed. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights reinforces this through the assertion that the will of the people shall be the basis of the authority of government. This year, as we mark the Declaration's 75th anniversary, let us give life to the principles it enshrines for everyone and together build a better, more just world for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary General. Our first plenary session on the subject of democracy delivering economic growth and shared prosperity will be chaired by President Yoon of the Republic of Korea. Mr. President, the floor is yours.
Honorable heads of states and citizens around the world yearning for freedom and democracy. It is my utmost pleasure to co-host the second Summit for Democracy along with the United States, Costa Rica, the Netherlands, and Zambia. And I welcome all of you to today's meeting. Let me begin the first session of the plenary for the second Summit for Democracy. The world is presently faced with a variety of crises and challenges. Geopolitical conflicts and rivalry over interest fragmented the international community and significantly reduced multilateral cooperation. On top of the bloc logic by authoritarian forces where they form cliques that outright deny rules-based international order, fake democracy represented by anti-intellectualism is lifting its ugly head globally.
가짜 민주주의가 전 세계적으로 고개를 들고 있습니다.
The first summit for democracy in 2021, with awareness of such issues, was held to jointly cope with decline of democracy. We must embark on a new journey to revive democracy that is currently under attack through our painstaking innovation and coalition. I hope that the second Summit for Democracy will serve as a landmark, an occasion to further reinforce international community's concerted effort toward freedom and democracy. The history of Korea's development, just like that of mankind, was a constant journey for freedom, and our work to defend freedom is still ongoing. 70 years ago, Korea was able to defend freedom thanks to the help of the international community, and now we are fulfilling our duties and role as a facilitator of freedom in the world. Ladies and gentlemen, globally, attempts to change the status quo by force threatens freedom. And fake news spreading in all directions through online media intimidates democracy that guarantees freedom. This, by threatening democracy, threatens our freedom itself. Democracy is a decision-making process for communities to defend freedom. Disinformation and misinformation and instigation distort public decision-making processes and disintegrates fundamental democratic systems such as elections. Limiting individual freedom should be based upon universally applicable laws and regulations, and that is rule of law. Liberal democracy that guarantees individual freedom can be implemented through rule of law. Since inauguration, I have emphasized freedom, human rights, and rule of law. These are the key factors that operate our democracy. It is clear that democracy is the only system and mechanism that defends and guarantees freedom of humanity. Korea, as a host country of the next Summit for Democracy, will do our part to further consolidate democracy that guarantees freedom and parliamentary democracy, which is represented by rule of law and representative democracy. Through close cooperation with the international community, we will robustly support the coalition to firmly defend democracy and take actions. I will stop here and now would like to listen to leaders participating as panelists for the first session and reflect on this issue together.
And now, the Prime Minister of the Hellenic Republic of Greece.
Mr. President, I strongly share your view expressed at September's UN General Assembly that genuine freedom is having the opportunity to live life to the fullest with dignity. But genuine freedom can only be delivered through genuine democracy. Adam Smith argued that laws and institutions that protect the liberty of individuals to accomplish their full potential result in greater prosperity for society at large. In Greece, we have learned that the hard way. The economic meltdown that gripped my country for much of the last decade threatened the very fabric of Greek society and weakened our institutions. Not anymore. In 2019, Greeks rejected dogma in favor of democratic resilience and reform based on strong legal frameworks and independent and representative institutions. And in the 4 years since, my government has prioritized the digitization of the state, waged war on corruption, and passed hundreds of laws modernizing my country. Our success does not lie in a top-down administrative process, but in the ownership of these important reforms by well-informed, socially minded, and engaged citizens who flourish in an open, tolerant, free, pluralistic, and democratic society. At the same time, government accountability and transparency, a free press, and equal access for all to a fair and impartial justice system is pivotal to delivering social justice and inclusive, equitable growth. And today, I am proud, Mr. Chairman, to report that Greece is one of only 3 countries in Europe to have incorporated the UN 17 Sustainable Development Goals into our annual planning. And we continue and will continue to pursue reforms around digital transition and e-governance too, driving this so important direct participation across civil society, but also enfranchising young and old alike. But digital isn't just a great enabler of economic growth. It is a great enabler of democratization itself. Digital innovation, tech, and now artificial intelligence are helping policymakers offer global solutions to complex geopolitical issues, from the fight against climate change to the preservation of biodiverse habitats, from green energy provision to the understanding and management of the drivers of mass migration. But closer to home, digital reform is reducing red tape and administrative costs for businesses, delivering a fairer and less cumbersome tax system, and opening up access for all to digital services. We know that in countries devoid of transparency, accountability, and representation, with poor track records on human rights and the rule of law, limited civil society participation, and few, if any, strong independent institutions, the pursuit of political agendas over economic growth and prosperity is preventing citizens from achieving their full potential. And today, the threat to our democratic way of life is perhaps more acute than at any time in the last 3 decades. That is why we must never waver in the promotion of political, civil, and economic rights by bolstering democratic institutions and the rule of law, championing accountability, challenging corruption, and fighting for inclusivity. And by promoting economic development and prosperity, we are not only strengthening the foundations of democracy as a bulwark against those who threaten us, but also as an incubator for those who wish to join us, for those who wish every citizen to live life to the fullest with dignity. Thank you very much.
Next up is the Prime Minister of the Republic of India.
Excellencies, Namaskar. I bring you the greetings of 1.4 billion people of India. The idea of elected leaders was a common feature in ancient India long before the rest of the world. In our ancient epic, Mahabharata, the first duty of citizens is described as choosing their own leader. Our sacred Vedas speak of political power being exercised by broad-based consultative bodies. There are also many historical references to republic states in ancient India where the rulers were not hereditary. India is indeed the mother of democracy. Excellencies, democracy is not just a structure. It is also a spirit. It is based on the belief that the needs and aspirations of every human being are equally important. That is why in India, our guiding philosophy is Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas, meaning striving together for inclusive growth. Whether it is our effort to fight climate change through lifestyle changes, to conserve water through distributed storage, or provide clean cooking fuel to everyone. Every initiative is powered by the collective efforts of the citizens of India. During COVID-19, India's response was people-driven. It is they who made it possible to administer over 2 billion doses of made-in-India vaccines. Our Vaccine Maitri initiative shared millions of vaccines with the world. This was also guided by the democratic spirit of Vasudhaiv Kutumbakam, one earth, one family, one future. Excellencies, there is much to say about the virtues of democracy, but let me say just this. India, despite the many global challenges, is the fastest growing major economy today. This itself is the best advertisement for democracy in the world. This itself says that democracy can deliver. Thank you, President Yoon, for chairing this session, and thank you to all the distinguished leaders for your presence. Thank you very much.
Next, we will hear from the President of the Democratic Republic of Timor-Leste.
Excellencies, dear friends, speaking from Dili, Timor-Leste, a great pleasure to share with you my thoughts of my own experience as President of this country. This is my second term. My first term was 2007-2012. When I finished my first term, I served with the United Nations as Under-Secretary General, Special Representative in West Africa, Guinea-Bissau, but also I was chair of the UN High-Level Panel on Peace Operations. I have traveled across the world, 135 countries on my list of countries that I have visited. I am familiar, conversant with most democracies around the world and with most non-democracies. Democracies, to survive, to flourish, they have to deliver. We have to deliver to the people. We have to deliver accessibility to the political leaders, to governors, accessibility to public goods, hospitals, education, employment, youth employment, inclusion, no excluding anyone, no one left behind. We have to show compassion and wisdom in dealing with the people of the LGBT community, the more neediest people in our societies, the blind, the physical handicap, the people with special needs. We have to look after everyone, embracing everyone. In a multi-ethnic, multicultural society, we must embrace everyone. Timor-Leste, we have zero political violence. We have zero ethnic-based or religious-based violence. And we are a flourishing democracy. We have absolute freedom of press. And that's the democracy. And who can deliver that? Who can create this condition? National leaders. Leaders with integrity, with humility, with vision, who embrace everyone, who engage constantly in dialogue. Outsiders will not impose democracy. Democracy, sustainable development have to come from us, national leaders. National leaders, I do not say only the president or the government. Community leaders, religious leaders, academics, intellectuals, civil society. It is only possible that democracy survives if we really do this. If our friends, United States and other industrialized countries commit more to eliminate extreme poverty in the developing countries, if we address access to clean water, if we all work together to save our environment for our own peoples in our own countries and globally. I thank you all for your kindness in inviting me to participate again in this fantastic forum.
Next up is the Prime Minister of the Italian Republic.
Thank you, President Yoon, and let me also express my gratitude to President Biden for the invitation to the second edition of the Summit for Democracy. This meaningful initiative is a great opportunity for our democracies to work together to face the unprecedented challenges and new threats that the pandemic first and the Russians' brutal aggression against Ukraine afterwards have posed to our democratic institutions. We all believe in democratic values and also in the deliverables of democracy, two of which are the focus of today's session: economic growth and shared prosperity. Since ancient times, people have discussed the connection between the form of political organization they choose for their community and the impact that choice had on the economic system of that community. Democracy and economic development are interdependent. Democracy influences a nation's economic and human development, and economic development can affect democratization processes. Only a democratic system can ensure the essential conditions for triggering sustainable growth, taking action in the areas most able to produce positive effects and guarantee the best conditions for development. I'm referring to justice, equity, legality, the correct functioning of the free market, and the need to ensure that institutions are stable, fast, and efficient. Having more stable and efficient institutions means being able to enjoy greater reliability at the international level and managing to focus energies on major strategic and long-term objectives. And this is precisely the direction my government is working in. In fact, we are firmly convinced that Italy's democracy can become even stronger and more solid through a presidential reform of the state, a reform that I consider to be fundamental and that may also represent a powerful measure for economic development. A democratic system guarantees free private initiative protects jobs, allows all citizens to participate in the definition of policy guidelines and to contribute to and benefit from the nation's social and economic growth. In a democratic system, economic growth must be matched by an increase in general well-being and an appropriate distribution of the resulting benefits. Economic development and improved well-being influence the democratic process and can trigger democratization processes. The more intense the growth, the more an adequate level of social and economic development is achieved, and more likely a population will choose the path of democracy. Democracy delivers economic growth and shared prosperity, but also economic growth and shared prosperity deliver democracy. This is also why the Italian government is pursuing the Mattei Plan for Africa, a non-predatory cooperation model to create value chains close by and to help African nations to live well of the resources available to them. Italy is committed to making its contribution in terms of investments and sharing its deep expertise in the food security sector. In this regard, I am happy to announce that from July 24 to 26, we will host in Rome the Stock-Taking Moment Food System Summit. We attach great importance to this event, also considering the role that the Roman hub for United Nations will be able to play. The summit will be a starting point to define a common strategy together with the United Nations and the European Union. We need to support those nations that have not yet reached our level of economic development. Solidarity is a fundamental democratic value. Also to demonstrate that West is not against the rest. In this regard, Italy wants to do its part, and we will continue to pursue these principles during our next G7 presidency. I believe that democracies can reach better results according to our principle and respecting our values. It takes time, but it is worth. And together, I'm sure we can absolutely make it. Thank you.
Now we have the President of the Republic of Kenya.
President Yoon, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank President Biden for putting this conversation together. And in discussing how democracy delivers economic growth and shared prosperity, it has been customary to address the way in which democracy and free enterprise are firmly conjoined. And I endorse such a perspective with the additional observation that the manner in which we exploit the opportunities in the ensuing political economy matters. All of society responds positively to democracy, as a result of which mutually reinforcing institutions of distinct type and quality take root and grow. A specific set of institutions underpins stability, credibility, and legitimacy, anchoring the evolution of a proper environment for experimentation, risk-taking, innovation, and competition. I submit that these institutions are only viable under a fundamentally democratic dispensation. A governance system which vigorously demonstrates uncompromising accountability, robust checks and balances, total transparency, and participation by the people from the grassroots all the way to the top and center. Capitals send the right type of signal and produces incentives that catalyze growth and stability in the economy and in politics. Such a system, so in every inevitably creates powerful institutions for channeling solidarity into effective collective action in pursuit of social justice, ecological responsibility, protection of vulnerable, as well as intergenerational equity. Democratic societies are by definition committed to sustainability and inclusion. These institutions' attributes are attractive to investment and enterprise because they offer the best opportunities for everyone to actualize their potential. They also guarantee the blossoming of good ideas, testing of inspired risky concepts, and the explosion of pioneering enterprises into highly profitable and impactful large employers. The rule of law and good governance enables a democratic system to endow the people with a qualitative, much better political environment and market than the repressive and coercive monopolies and unilateral, arbitrary policymaking, as well as the instability and uncertainty which inevitably defines undemocratic systems. The promulgation of a new constitution, progressive, citizen-centered, and rights-based constitution anchored on national values and principles of governance kick-started the implementation of Vision 2030 in Kenya. As a result, Kenya has sustained a strong path of economic development and inclusive growth, whereby wealth has been generated, poverty reduced, unemployment increased on an unprecedented scale. Before Vision 2030, before our new constitution, we were a $32 billion economy. After Vision 2030, we grew from 45 billion economy in 2008 to 264 billion economy in 2022, last year, that is. This is not accidental by any means. In deploying the full promise of democracy to unlock political and economic freedom to their fullest extent, Kenya's constitution has enabled us to demonstrate that the nexus between democracy and sustainable development is direct and consequential. And that is why this year, last year, we had the most democratic election with outcomes that were celebrated across the globe. Our commitment in the democratic principles and institutions is unshakable. I believe that the purpose of government is to safeguard the freedom of every citizen to imagine and pursue better material conditions through work, civic engagement, and ecological responsibility. This is our path to sustainable development, along which we are already making tremendous progress. And I am privileged to join you in this conversation of our time, and that democracy delivers progress and development. I thank you.
Next, we will hear from the President of the Republic of Botswana.
Your Excellencies and dear colleagues, all dignitaries, ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning or afternoon to you all. The theme of this plenary session suggests that without democracy established and firmly in place, it would prove difficult to talk about economic growth or shared prosperity. We know this to be the case in many parts of the world, where the absence of democracy is reflected in armed conflicts, human displacements, economic collapse, absence of freedoms, violation of human rights, and no shared prosperity. Over the years, Botswana has received many accolades as Africa's economic miracle and a beacon of peace and democracy. To many, little attention was given to a forgotten reality that at the time of our independence in 1966, Botswana was among the poorest countries in the world, a tactless wasteland with no hope, as some opined. Indeed, there was no prosperity to share, and little was known about our democracy, which is founded on the principles already practiced in the Setswana culture of Terisano, or consultation. Our democratic ideals and economic transformation have long been set on a strong foundation of principles of democracy, development, unity, and self-reliance, and boto, which is humility. Our founding fathers were fully convinced that a constitutional and multi-party democratic republic had to be in place, a republic premised on the primacy of respect for and commitment to the rule of law was best suited to take the country forward. After independence in 1966, we enacted legislative instruments to sustain our democratic ideals and management of all natural resources of the country. The National Vision 2036, the National Development Plans, recognized sustainability as a development imperative to be achieved. I can confidently ascertain that on the basis of a people-centered governance, democracy delivers a pathway for the needed avenues to pursue sustainable development goals. Your Excellencies, our practice of consultation is a major component of our democratic discourse, centered around our Kotla system, our traditional Congress, so to speak, which promotes tolerance, inclusion, freedom of assembly and speech, and collective decision-making. The reason we are able to participate in this summit is primarily linked to our firm grip on democratic principles of over 5 decades. I wish to point out that we do not take for granted what democracy has delivered for us as a country. We have learned by experience that there is a parallel between improving economic conditions and consolidating democracy. We hold a strong view and conviction that a participatory democratic system comprising strong and functional institutions, not strong men or women, will ensure that the primary shareholders, that is our people, are at the epicenter of the formation and functionality of their structures of governance and shaping their own future. Your Excellencies, it is against this background that the government of Botswana and the National Democratic Institute, together with other partners, hosted the Summit on Constitutionalism and Democratic Consolidation in Africa from 6th to 8th July 2022 in Gaborone. This summit fulfilled the pledge we made during the 2021 Summit for Democracy, and its key outcome was the adoption of the Gaborone Declaration, which, among other issues, acknowledged African citizen support for constitutionalism and presidential term limits. It is our earnest hope that the widespread circulation and signing of the Declaration of Principles will secure a prosperous democratic future for our continent. Allow me to reiterate that Botswana's strong economic growth and shared prosperity has been shaped by our well-founded belief in a strong, functional, and a more inclusive participatory democracy. I therefore wish to urge other global leaders to strengthen our commitment to advancing global democracy in order to secure a foundation for greater human progress. Finally, I wish to thank the co-hosts for organizing this very important summit. Thank you.
And now, the Prime Minister of the State of Israel.
I want to thank the world leaders and President Biden, who's been a friend of 40 years, for convening this important conference. You know, Israel and the United States have had their occasional differences, but I want to assure you that the alliance between the world's greatest democracy and a strong, proud, and independent democracy, Israel, in the heart of the Middle East, is unshakable. Nothing can change that. We have worked together, Israel and the United States, to achieve the historic Abraham Accords that made peace between Israel and 4 Arab states. We are now working together to expand these peace accords further, and they obviously bring increased prosperity to our peoples. The topic of this forum is democracy and shared prosperity. Now, in my long tenure as Prime Minister, I've had the opportunity, and as Foreign Minister, I've had the opportunity to address both issues. 20 years ago, I led a free market revolution in Israel. Israel was a semi-socialist economy, highly regulated, highly controlled, highly taxed, with very low participation in the workforce, with monopolies, including government monopolies, abounding throughout our economy. I proposed changes, radical changes, to correct this. This was met with massive protests, with months and months of national labor strikes, with admonitions that this would wreck the Israeli economy, that would make the rich go richer and the poor grow poorer, and so on. But we persisted, and the results have been very clear. After these reforms, Israel grew at 4 to 5% annual growth rate of GDP for 2 decades. We went from $17,000 GDP per capita to $54,000 GDP per capita, according to the IMF. Unemployment went down. Participation in the workforce went up in all sectors dramatically. The Israeli economy has become a player on the global scene, allowing for innovation, enterprise, and of course, participation with many, many other economies and many, many other companies in many countries. I'm saying this because it's not only that the economy grew and prosperity increased, but shared prosperity increased. Because contrary to the predictions that the rich will grow richer and the poor will grow poorer, everybody grew richer. And in fact, the Gini coefficient that marks inequality went down to its lowest point in 20 years. We achieved prosperity and shared prosperity. Now, 20 years later, we're engaged in a second public debate. And you may have noted, Israel is undergoing, in its robust democracy, a very intensive public debate. And the debate is, how do we ensure a proper democracy? Democracy means the will of the people, as expressed by a majority. And it also means protection of civil rights, individual rights. It's the balance between the two. Now, half of people are convinced that the will of the majority, as expressed in the legislative and executive branch, has been, in many ways, obstructed by an all-powerful judiciary that dominates them and doesn't let the public will be expressed. The other half of the people are concerned that maybe, even if this is true, that if any curtailment of judiciary powers is enacted, this would somehow impair and obstruct civil liberties. And I think both considerations have to be taken into account. I think both of them are valid, both of them are true, and we have to make sure that as we shift the pendulum from one side of an ever-powerful judiciary, which is different from an independent judiciary, how do we ensure that the judiciary remains independent and that we balance the need to strengthen the executive and the legislative, and at the same time, protect individual rights? I think that balance can be achieved. And that's why I've promoted a pause that now enables both the opposition and the coalition to sit down and try to achieve a broad national consensus to achieve both goals. And I believe this is possible. We're now engaged in exactly this conversation. Several governments have expressed their concern. So I want to assure you now of two things. The first is that we have, I think, in the midst of this very robust debate, I think we have a stark opportunity to strengthen democracy, to restore a proper balance between the three branches of government, because that's what protects majority rights and individual rights. And at the same time, also to enshrine civil rights with an agreed national consensus. I think this is something that that is an opportunity that Israel has waited for. These things are always dramatic. They're always engaged in public and often painful discourse, but we have to move from protest to agreement. And that's where I want to get. The right to protest is sacrosanct. But I think the obligation for national leaders is to try to take these issues in contention and merge them into a happy center. So the second thing that I want to assure you is that Israel was, is, and it will always remain a proud, strong, and vibrant democracy as a beacon of liberty and shared prosperity in the heart of the Middle East. Thank you.
Next, we will hear from the Prime Minister of the Republic of Croatia.
Dear President Yoon, distinguished colleagues, it is my pleasure to join you for this second Summit for Democracy. I wish to thank President Biden and other co-hosts for their efforts in organizing this summit today. As we gather today, democracy and the rules-based international order are under attack in Ukraine. We, as the Croatian government, have been standing with Ukraine and its leadership and its people throughout this last almost 14 months, because they are not only defending the values of freedom, democracy, and peace in their own country, but they are standing for the entire democratic world. That's why Croatia was so articulate in expressing solidarity with Ukraine and condemning Russia as an aggressor. We are in particular a country that among European countries remembers the situations when we were ourselves victims of aggression, and that's why we have immediately reacted in a natural and reflex manner. For the past more than 30 years, democracy has guided our path for strengthening of our institutions, for strengthening of our economic system, and creating the preconditions for joining the European and the transatlantic world. I have to say that democracy equals independence of Croatia, equals our statehood, equals all the values that we stand for and that have been forged globally since the Second World War. Recently, since our two summits, Croatia has joined two deeper integrations on the European continent. One is the Schengen area and the other one is the Eurozone. This is exactly an example how through democratic consolidation and development, fulfillment of the highest criteria, we become more integrated, but also economically and financially more protected in the context of the European integration. Therefore, we are the proof that democracy delivers economic growth and the shared prosperity for the citizens. This is also a plus for the enhancement of the European project to be as robust and as beneficial to the citizens and the states that are part of the European integration. We have, in the times of crisis, and they now last for the 3 years, kept one main objective as the key goal of the Croatian government, and that was the objective of social cohesion. The crisis of the global pandemic, the biggest one in 100 years that has affected all of us, the energy, food, financial, economic and social crisis that ensued as the consequence of Russia's aggression against Ukraine has made us do our maximum to keep the social cohesion in our country and avoid the social fracture. This is in particular important that through difficult times, we as governments, with our interventionist policies, keep the fabric of the society together and that no one has been left behind. This is a major objective for my government, and I have to say that so far we have managed to attain it. At the same time, over the past couple of years, we have increased our energy independence in terms of supply, invested in the liquefied natural gas terminal on the island of Krk, thus not only making Croatian needs for households, businesses and industry completely independent, but also we have managed to create a regional energy hub through the existing critical infrastructure that Croatia has. What we have also tried to do is the increase of the resilience of our economy, but also in the times of crisis, keep the human rights and civil liberties to the maximum possible extent in the moments where, due to the pandemic we had for health reasons, we had to put forward some restrictions. We tried to be balanced as much as possible. The path forward is that we as democracies stick together, that in the global context of the world that is basically divided into democratic world and democratic regimes and those who are authoritarian. We forge alliances between democracies. We put forward our values. We keep the support of our citizens because democracy is the rule of our citizens and our peoples, and that we show the responsibility of the governments in the tough times vis-à-vis our citizens, but joined in the same values that unite us. And I'm very grateful for all the speeches and comments that I have heard throughout the panel this morning. Thank you very much, and best regards from Zagreb.
In closing, we will now turn back to the President of the Republic of Korea.
경제 성장과 공동 번영을 달성하는 것이 쉽지는 않지만 우리가 함께 한다면 결코 불가능하지 않다는 것을 확신하게 됐습니다. 제2차 민주주의 정상회의를 계기로
In order to tide over the complex crisis facing the international community on the cohesion of the second summit for democracy, we need to see a strong coalition and cooperation among democracies.
이루어져야 할 것입니다.
I look forward to continuous and in-depth discussion among the leaders for freedom and democracy.
We will have to leave it there. More news coming up at 9 p.m. Korea time. Thanks for watching.
Loved and watched around the world. We want to make more animations to reach more children. Traveling time and space. Developing adventure and curiosity.